Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. Apologies as I'm recording this video, I am very tired, didn't get too much sleep last night. Went to bed very late, obviously watching this fight, so apologies if I miss a thing or two. But nevertheless, Terence Crawford stopped Shawn Porter in the 10th round in what was a really good fight in my opinion. Competitive all of the way through until the stoppage, and it was a pretty good watch in my opinion. The fight was fought at a very frenetic pace. Both guys were really amped up. The atmosphere sounded really good as well in the arena, and yeah, all in all, it was a good fight. And the biggest win of Terence Crawford's career, as far as I'm concerned. Now, early on in this fight, I have to say, I was actually very impressed with Shawn Porter. In the first 6 rounds, I felt Shawn Porter was actually a step ahead of Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter came out very early on, and he applied pressure. In the very first couple of seconds, he opened up and threw a couple of big hooks. But after that, he kind of he applied educated pressure. He was utilising his jab very well early on, and he was catching Terence Crawford with that shot. In fact, in the first half of this fight, Shawn Porter's jab was far more effective than Terence Crawford's, in my opinion. He was far more consistent with the jab and landed it throughout the first half of this fight. He was beating Terence Crawford to the jab on many occasions, and he was applying good educated pressure. He was picking his moments. He was landing good flurries here and there. And yeah, I felt Shawn Porter was doing really well early in this fight. When both guys exchanged, in my opinion, Shawn Porter was getting the better of it in terms of punches landed. However, I will say this, in watching it live, despite Porter getting the better of the exchanges in terms of punches landed, Terence Crawford's shots were far harder. In the first 6 rounds, one shot I liked from Terence Crawford was that kind of looping, scooping uppercut to the midsection of Shawn Porter, and he was catching Porter with that shot quite regularly throughout this fight, and I think that shot for Terence Crawford was a big reason for why he won this fight, and I'll go into that a bit later. But yeah, the first 6 rounds, there were times when Crawford looked a little uncomfortable. He was still, landing good shots. He was landing, particularly out of a southpaw stance, that left hand, and also the check right hook as Shawn Porter was coming in. But for me, the first half of this fight, Terence Crawford was kind of getting outworked, and again, believe it or not, at times he was getting outboxed by Shawn Porter. So yeah, Porter started this fight very well. In the second half of this fight, I felt Terence Crawford really started to, be more effective with his work. I think his shots started to tell, particularly in the second half of this fight. He was still landing that left hand to the body, but he was also finding the left uppercut to the head as well, which would prove pivotal later on. As the fight was playing out, one impressive factor about Terence Crawford's game was how physically strong Terence Crawford was. Usually with Shawn Porter, people struggle with Porter's strength. However, Terence Crawford was able to handle that strength quite easily. In fact, Terence Crawford looked the stronger man in the clinch. He was able to hold Porter and really push him back at times. I will say though, I felt the holding from Terence Crawford was over the top, and I think he should have got warnings for it, quite frankly, because he was holding from very early on in this fight, and it was a big part of his game in this bout. But yeah, second half of this fight, I felt that Shawn Porter started to walk into more flush shots, the check right hook, the left hand to the body, uppercut to the head, things like that. And yeah, Porter was still competitive in these rounds, like round 8 for example. For me, round 8 was a big turning point in this fight. Terence Crawford started the round really well. He was firing some really good punches from distance. Porter was evading some of these shots with head movement, but some were getting through. As the round went forwards, Shawn Porter then responded and landed some really good overhand rights bang on the chin of Terence Crawford. Crawford took those shots well, and as Porter was continuing to throw punches and apply pressure, Terence Crawford caught Shawn Porter with a huge, it looked like a left uppercut to the body, and you could really hear the impact. It sounded like a shotgun, and after that, you could tell that Shawn Porter was hurt to the body. I don't think Terence Crawford realised it. I don't think the commentary team quite realised it. But for me, Shawn Porter was hurt to the body in round 8, and for the rest of that round, Porter didn't really throw much, and he was really standoffish. I think he really felt that body shot. And after round 8, for me, the intensity wasn't quite there with Shawn Porter anymore. I mean, after 6 rounds, I don't see any way how you can have Terence Crawford winning. Shawn Porter was in control to an extent. He was winning the fight, right? But that round 8 for me changed the tide, and it really shifted the momentum in Terence Crawford's favour. Skip forward to round 10, that is where the fight ended. Shawn Porter, coming in, trying to land those looping punches. I think he threw an overhand right maybe, and he dipped down, and then he basically walked into the uppercut of Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter went down. He didn't look too badly hurt, to be honest. Porter then beat the count. He tried to get his get back. He threw a bunch of punches trying to, avenge that knockdown. But then he walked into a combination which culminated in a short right hook to the head. That dropped Shawn Porter again. I think that shot hurt Porter more than the first one. But nevertheless, it wasn't like Shawn Porter was doing the stanky leg, or, it didn't look like he was on the verge of necessarily getting knocked out. In fact, after the second knockdown, when Porter was on the ground, he was beating the ground in frustration. He knew he made a mistake. He got up, he yelled fuck, he knew he made a mistake. And at this point, Shawn Porter's dad, his trainer, Kenny Porter, basically stopped the fight. He stopped the fight. I think Shawn Porter could have continued, and in a fight of this magnitude, I know Shawn Porter's Kenny's son, but this is boxing. This is a world championship fight. I think he should have allowed Shawn Porter to continue, to be honest with you. I really do. He didn't look out on his feet or anything like that. He just got gung-ho. He got caught a couple of times and he got dropped. That happens with Shawn Porter on occasion, and this looked the exact same kind of thing. So the stoppage, I mean, to me that was very anticlimactic, quite frankly. I think they could have allowed Shawn Porter to continue, at least let him try and fight through the round, get him back to the corner, and then make your decision. Again, I know Shawn's Kenny's son, but again, this is a world championship fight. You're fighting a guy who is pound for pound, according to a lot of people. You got to stay in there, as far as I'm concerned. And Shawn Porter looked very disappointed with the stoppage. He didn't look too happy, quite frankly. But when Crawford had Shawn Porter in a bit of trouble, credit to Crawford, he stepped on him, tried to get the job done, and that's exactly what he did. So, yeah, good fight. Not a fan of the ending, to be honest, but Terence Crawford won the fight, and he passed his first elite test at welterweight. Now, a lot of people are going to make comparisons with Crawford's performance against Shawn Porter with the likes of Errol Spence Jr., and that's natural, right? We knew that going into this fight. But it's a weird one, right? On paper, this is a really impressive result for Terence Crawford, but I have to say, for the majority of this fight, I really wasn't impressed with Terence Crawford. The guy was getting beaten to the jab by Shawn Porter. He was getting out-hustled. He was getting out-pointed for a lot of this fight. And at times, man, he was swinging wildly, throwing himself off balance, and eating flush shots, in particular, the overhand right. One thing I'll say is this. I think I underestimated Terence Crawford as a fighter, as a slugger. I think he does have dog in him. I think he does have that quote-unquote mean streak. as people like to say. However, I think the general population have drastically overrated Terence Crawford as a technical boxer. When I looked at that fight last night, from very early on, the thought that I had in my mind, if there was a world-class boxer puncher in the welterweight division, I think Terence Crawford gets knocked out. I really do. And yeah, like I said, it was a weird one. It's a great result on paper to stop Shawn Porter, no doubt about it, but, you know, as Dwyer likes to say, knockouts cause amnesia. Was Crawford really impressive before the knockout? In my opinion, no. But that is just my opinion. Hopefully next we see Terence Crawford get another big fight, maybe a unification fight. Yordenis Ugas, Errol Spence Jr. I do think Errol Spence needs a fight before he fights Crawford, to be honest, just because he's been out of a ring so long and he's coming off that injury. I think the best way to really go about it would be Spence versus Ugas in a unification and then Crawford fights the winner. But, you know, the WBA are making Ugas go through certain obligations, so that may not happen. Who knows how this is going to work out, but all I want to see is Terence Crawford fight another top welterweight, and I'll be more than happy. But yeah, interesting fight, a good fight all of the way through, but in my opinion, not a satisfactory ending, but it is what it is. Share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Del Boy. Peace.